weeks it had been Clara's sanctuary and her war room. She hadn't lost a single pound. In fact, under the careful attention of Dominic's private chef, who prepared rich risottos and decadent chocolate soufflés at Dominic's strict instruction, to spoil her, she had never looked softer, healthier, or more radiant. Her wardrobe had been entirely replaced. Gone were the modest, oversized cardigans she wore to hide herself. In their place were tailored silk wrap dresses, wide-leg trousers from Brunello Cucinelli, and cashmere coats that accentuated her lush, full-figured silhouette. But her true transformation wasn't physical. It was the lethal sharpening of her mind. Clara sat at the massive oak dining table, 4 glowing monitors displaying lines of complex code and financial spreadsheets. As a mathematician, she understood numbers better than anyone Richard had ever hired at Aegis Pay. Because she had lived with Richard during the company's infancy, she knew the foundational architecture of his financial software. Dominic stood behind her, sipping a dark espresso. He wore a fitted black Henley that clung to his broad chest, his presence a heavy, comforting heat against her back. He rested his large, calloused hands on her plush shoulders, massaging the tension from her neck. "You've been staring at the Cayman shell accounts for 6 hours, Maya Bella," Dominic murmured, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Take a break. Let my accountants handle the grunt work." "Your accountants are looking for traditional money laundering," Clara replied, her eyes darting across the screen. "Richard is arrogant, but he isn't stupid. He wouldn't hide your 50 million in a standard offshore trust. He hid it in the algorithm." Dominic's hands paused. "Explain." Clara leaned back, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. "Aegis Pay processes microtransactions, millions of them a second. I just ran a regression analysis on the transaction latency. Richard coded a fractional siphon. Every time Aegis processes a payment, it skims a fraction of a cent, something so microscopic the SEC and Bloomberg auditors wouldn't catch it. He's pooling that skimmed money into a decentralized crypto wallet to pay you back without it showing on his balance sheets. He's stealing from his own users to cover his mob debt." A low, dangerous laugh rumbled in Dominic's chest. He spun Clara's chair around so she faced him, his storm-grey eyes burning with a mixture of predatory pride and deep, unrestrained lust. "You are a terrifying woman, Clara Higgins," he whispered, leaning down to capture her lips in a bruising, possessive kiss. When he pulled away, Clara was breathless, her skin flushed. He looked at her, not just as a lover but as a true partner. "If we hand this proof to the Securities and Exchange Commission on the morning of his initial public offering," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly with adrenaline, "Aegis Pay doesn't just crash, it burns to the ground. Richard goes to federal prison for wire fraud." "No," Dominic corrected his tone, turning to ice. "If we just send it to the SEC, the government seizes the assets. We don't want to destroy the company, Clara. We want to own it." Dominic stepped away, pulling a sleek, encrypted phone from his pocket. "I'm going to have my attorneys draft a hostile debt-to-equity conversion contract. Richard owes me 50 million plus interest. But with the threat of federal prison hanging over his head, he's going to sign over 60% of Aegis Pay's voting shares directly to you." "To me," Clara gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "I have enough money, Clara," Dominic said, looking at her with fierce devotion. "This is your revenge. You built that empire. Tomorrow you take it back." The morning of the Aegis Pay initial public offering broke crisp and cold over Lower Manhattan. Outside the neoclassical columns of the New York Stock Exchange Broad Street was a sea of satellite trucks, barricades, and shivering financial journalists. This was the most anticipated tech IPO since Facebook. Inside the NYSE's exclusive VIP bell-ringing suite, hovering directly above the frenzied trading floor, Richard Kensington was pacing a hole into the antique Persian rug. He looked immaculate in a midnight blue Tom Ford suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, but his demeanor was fraying. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his Rolex Daytona. The $50 million payment to the Falcone syndicate was now 2 weeks overdue. Every time his phone buzzed, his stomach plummeted, expecting it to be a picture of a shallow grave. He had convinced himself that his algorithmic siphon was flawless, that he had successfully masked the embezzlement, but the absolute silence from the underworld was deafening. Sitting on a velvet sofa nearby, oblivious to the impending doom, was Chloe. She was busy adjusting the lighting on her iPhone, pouting her lips for an Instagram story. "Babe," she whined, not looking up from her screen. "Can we do a quick video before the bell? My followers are literally dying to see my dress." "Not right now, Chloe," Richard snapped, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He turned to his lead counsel. "Are we absolutely sure the SEC clearance is finalized? No last-minute holds." "You're entirely cleared, Mr. Kensington," the lawyer assured him. "In 10 minutes, you ring that bell, and you become a multi-billionaire on paper." Richard let out a shaky breath, finally allowing a smug smile to creep onto his face. He had done it. He had outsmarted the banks, he had outsmarted the government, and he had outsmarted Dominic Falcone. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany double doors of the VIP suite burst open. Richard's private security detail, 2 massive ex-Marines, stepped forward with their hands on their earpieces, only to be violently shoved against the wood paneling by 4 men in impeccably tailored charcoal suits. The intruders moved with terrifying synchronized precision, stripping the guards of their concealed weapons in seconds and securing the exits. The excited chatter in the suite died instantly. The PR executives froze. Chloe dropped her phone. Stepping gracefully through the parted sea of armed men was Clara Higgins. Richard's jaw dropped. She was a vision of absolute, untouchable power. Clara wore a bespoke crimson-red trench coat, tightly cinched to accentuate her wide, lush waist, paired with razor-sharp black Christian Louboutin stilettos. Her thick dark hair cascaded in glossy, voluminous waves over her shoulders. She didn't look like the broken, weeping woman he had discarded on the marble floors of the Plaza Hotel. She moved with the predatory confidence of a billionaire predator, completely unapologetic about the space her curves occupied. And walking right beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, was the undeniable king of the New York underworld. Dominic Falcone radiated pure, lethal menace. "Clara." Richard choked out the color draining from his face, so fast he looked sickly. His eyes darted frantically from his ex-fiancée to the mafia boss standing beside her. What the hell is this? You can't be here." Security works for me today," Dominic stated, his voice, a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He stepped further into the room, his storm-grey eyes pinning Richard in place. "You missed a payment, Richard." "Mr. Falcone, please," Richard stammered, abandoning his golden boy CEO persona in an instant. He held his hands up, taking a terrified step backward. "The IPO. The liquidity is coming. I just need the bell to ring. The moment the market opens, I'll have your money. I swear to God." "I don't want your liquid cash, Richard," Dominic said, coldly, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. He gestured toward Clara. "My brilliant associate here has found some very interesting discrepancies in your transaction latency." Richard's eyes widened in pure, unadulterated horror. He stared at Clara, the reality of her presence finally clicking into place. You looked at the code." "I didn't just look at it, Richard. I dissected it." Clara said, her voice smooth, steady, and devoid of any leftover affection. She felt a thrilling rush of adrenaline. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. I found the fractional siphon. I found the decentralized crypto wallets you've been using to skim fractions of a cent off every user transaction. You're stealing from your own customers to pay your mob debts. You're out of your depth, Clara, Richard hissed, attempting a desperate bluff. You don't understand the architecture. It's a latency buffer. It's federal wire fraud. Clara interrupted sharply, pulling a thick manila envelope from her designer tote bag and slamming it onto the glass coffee table. I forwarded a preliminary summary of your latency buffer to Director Mitchell at the Securities and Exchange Commission 30 minutes ago. Are you insane? Richard screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged forward, his fists clenched, but before he could take a second step, Dominic moved. In a blur of motion, Dominic had Richard by the throat, slamming him back against the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the trading floor. The glass groaned under the impact. Richard gagged his perfectly polished shoes, kicking off the ground as Dominic effortlessly lifted him. Keep your voice down when you speak to her, Dominic whispered lethally, his face inches from Richard's sweating forehead. She is a queen. You are a dying insect. Show some respect. Chloe let out a terrified squeak, realizing exactly who Dominic was, and the extreme danger she was in. The model didn't hesitate. She grabbed her silver clutch, kicked off her heels, and practically sprinted for the door, abandoning Richard without a single backward glance. Dominic dropped Richard, who collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air and clutching his bruised throat. The SEC is holding off on their raid, Clara said coldly, looking down at the pathetic man who had once humiliated her for her weight. They are waiting for my final confirmation. If I make the call, Aegis Pay crashes before it even opens, and you spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Dominic pulled a sleek silver Montblanc pen from his breast pocket and dropped it next to the contract spilling out of the manila envelope. This is a hostile debt-to-equity conversion, Dominic commanded. You owe me $50 million plus massive interest. You are going to sign over 65% of Aegis Pay's voting shares directly to Clara. You will instantly step down as CEO, citing sudden health reasons. Clara takes over as majority shareholder and chairwoman. If you sign it, Clara patches the siphon from the inside. The SEC gets an update that the anomaly was a benign bug, and you get to walk away with a minority stake and your freedom. You can't do this to me. Richard wept, completely broken, his ego shattered. I built this company. No, Clara corrected him, her voice ringing with finality. I built you, and today I'm repossessing my investment. Sign the paper, Richard. Trembling, violently defeated on every level, Richard crawled to the table, picked up the pen, and signed his life away. Clara picked up the document, handing it to one of Dominic's men. She looked at Richard one last time. Security will escort you out the back. You don't fit the profile of my brand anymore. As Richard was hauled out of the room by his collar, the NYSE floor manager tentatively peeked through the doorway, his face pale. Miss the bell rings in 2 minutes. Clara turned to Dominic. He offered her his arm, his eyes blazing with absolute devotion, pride, and burning desire. Shall we, Madam Chairwoman? Dominic asked, a devastating wolfish smile playing on his lips. Clara looped her arm through his, her soft, lush body pressing against his hard, protective frame. She felt entirely invincible. We shall. Together they walked out onto the balcony, overlooking the frantic trading floor. As Clara pressed the button to ring the opening bell, the deafening roar of Wall Street washed over them. She had survived a brutal betrayal, embraced her true worth, and claimed a billionaire's empire, all with the deadliest king in the city, standing proudly by her side. If you loved this story of ultimate revenge power and finding real love that appreciates every curve, you are not alone. Clara proved that real strength and beauty don't fit into a superficial corporate mold. Smash that like button if you are cheering for Clara and Dominic's epic takeover. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a dramatic mafia romance, and subscribe for more thrilling, twisting stories of betrayal and sweet, unstoppable vengeance. See you next time.